What would you do if the FBI showed up at your doorstep unannounced? Not with a friendly greeting or a casual question, but with a full-blown search warrant, flashlights cutting through the darkness, and the unmistakable weight of authority pressing down on your shoulders. Imagine the terror, the disbelief, and the absolute shock of being in the spotlight for reasons far darker than any Hollywood scandal you've ever read about. Now, imagine this happening to one of America's most famous figures. Someone whose face is instantly recognizable, whose work has touched millions, someone who has built a public persona of trust, charm, and relatability. That someone is Rob Reiner. And what the FBI discovered beneath his mansion turned disbelief into horror. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the outside, Rob Reiner's life seems like the perfect Hollywood story. Acclaimed actor, director of beloved films, political activist, philanthropist, family man. The world knows him as a creator of classics like When Harry Met Sally and A Few Good Men. A man who brings characters and stories to life in ways that captivate audiences. But behind the walls of his sprawling mansion, behind the manicured lawns, beyond the facade of normalcy and prestige, lay secrets no one could have predicted. Secrets so shocking, so incomprehensible, that even the agents tasked with uncovering them turned pale the moment they set foot inside the hidden depths. What they found was a tunnel, not a small crawl space or a maintenance passageway, but a fully constructed, secret tunnel running beneath the mansion. Its entrance was hidden so well that no casual visitor, no curious neighbor, no paparazzi could ever have guessed its existence. It was the sort of thing that belonged in a movie, a thriller, or a conspiracy-laden novel. Except this was real. And as the FBI navigated its dark, winding path, what they encountered would haunt the nation. Lifeless bodies, evidence of things no one expected, clues pointing to a story far larger than any Hollywood headline could contain. The moment they discovered the first body, the agents froze. Their training had prepared them for danger, for violence, for human unpredictability. But not for this. There is a difference between seeing chaos in a crime scene and seeing carefully hidden horror, meticulously concealed beneath the surface of wealth and fame. And the horror didn't stop there. Each chamber they entered revealed more, layers of concealment that hinted at planning, secrecy, and a narrative that had been buried for years, perhaps decades. So why does this matter now? Why should you, sitting at home, scrolling through another day of news, care about a hidden tunnel beneath a mansion in the Hollywood Hills? Because it challenges everything we believe about the people we idolize. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that fame and respectability can be masks. It raises questions about trust, morality, and how far someone might go to protect secrets. And it makes us wonder how many other perfect lives hide the unspeakable beneath their polished exteriors. Even as the news broke, rumors spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered to reporters, former staff shared cryptic hints, and social media exploded with speculation, theories, and disbelief. How could someone so public, so seemingly ordinary in his generosity and charm, be connected to such darkness? The tunnel itself became a symbol. A metaphor for the hidden lives we can never fully know, the secrets lurking just beneath the surface, invisible to the world until the wrong eyes, or the right ones, find them. Let's pause for a moment and consider the logistics of it. Constructing a tunnel beneath a mansion isn't a casual undertaking. It requires planning, resources, engineering, and most importantly, secrecy. Every step, every wall, every reinforced chamber had to be deliberately designed to remain hidden from the outside world. This wasn't an accident, a misjudgment, or a fleeting whim. This was deliberate. And if it had been discovered earlier, by anyone else, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The FBI didn't stumble upon this. The tip came from someone who knew something was wrong, someone whose conscience, or perhaps fear, pushed them to act. And yet, even with the information in hand, no one could have prepared for the reality waiting beneath Reiner's property. The tunnel stretched further than anyone imagined, branching in ways that suggested premeditation, and at its deepest points, it held evidence that turned speculation into undeniable truth. Evidence that forced agents, journalists, and ultimately the public to confront the shocking idea that this story was far bigger than one person. As we begin this journey together, imagine yourself walking down that dark passage. Feel the chill, the claustrophobia, the uncertainty. Hear the echoes of footsteps, the whispers of history, the unanswered questions that demand resolution. What was hidden here and why? Who knew? Who helped? And who could have prevented it? And most importantly, what else lies buried, waiting to be discovered? In this video, we will uncover every piece of this labyrinthine mystery. We will examine the mansion, the tunnel, the victims, and the possible motives. We will dive into the whispers, the rumors, and the official findings. We will explore Hollywood's dark underbelly and confront the uncomfortable reality of how secrecy and power intersect. And through it all, one question will haunt you. Could the unthinkable have been prevented, or was this a story destined to emerge from the shadows no matter what? By the end of this introduction, you'll understand why this story has captured the imagination of millions. You'll see the patterns, the anomalies, the contradictions that make this one of the most chilling discoveries in recent history. You'll sense the drama that stretches far beyond a single Hollywood mansion. And most importantly, you'll be hooked, desperate to know what comes next. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Imagine arriving at Rob Reiner's mansion for the first time. The sun is just beginning to set, casting long, warm shadows across immaculately manicured lawns. At first glance, it's the picture of Hollywood opulence: sprawling gardens, ornate fountains, a grand facade of stone and glass, and security cameras discreetly hidden among the hedges. The kind of house that screams wealth, success, and normalcy, all wrapped in the comforting illusion that fame has its perks but no perils. But as the FBI would soon discover, appearances can be fatally deceiving. Beneath the beauty, beneath the serene exterior, lay a secret so shocking that even those closest to the property had no idea it existed. The mansion itself was built in the mid-1980s, a time when Reiner's career was flourishing and his influence in Hollywood was at its peak. It was the kind of house that was both a personal sanctuary and a statement. Guests would marvel at the elegant living spaces, the carefully curated art, the library with rare first editions lining the walls. Family photos adorned the mantelpieces, projecting warmth, stability, and a sense of ordinary life. But ordinary life, it turns out, is a clever disguise. Longtime staff members who worked at the mansion often spoke in hushed tones about odd occurrences, small, almost imperceptible details that, in hindsight, hinted at something much darker. Doors that appeared locked but weren't, strange noises coming from areas that shouldn't exist, the occasional scent of damp earth lingering in hallways where no garden should reach. These anomalies were dismissed at the time. Staff learned quickly that in a house of such size, peculiarities were normal. But for some, the inconsistencies never fully added up. The mansion's security measures were extensive. Cameras, motion detectors, and biometric locks created an environment of controlled access. Yet, these measures, while designed for protection, inadvertently helped conceal the deeper secret. No one could access the underground tunnel without specific knowledge, and the very technologies intended to protect the family made the tunnel invisible to outsiders. Even seasoned investigators initially struggled to reconcile the idea that beneath the carefully monitored estate lay a labyrinth unknown to anyone outside a select few. The design of the house itself offered clues that, at first, seemed innocuous. A small wine cellar tucked away behind a false wall. A basement storage room with peculiar ventilation shafts. Even the layout of the property suggested deliberate compartmentalization, as though certain areas were meant to be easily overlooked. These architectural choices, combined with Reiner's meticulous attention to detail, allowed the tunnel to remain concealed for decades. It was as if the mansion itself was hiding in plain sight, holding its secrets beneath a carefully constructed veneer of celebrity normalcy. Neighbors, too, played their part in maintaining the illusion. In Hollywood, gossip travels fast, but the mansion seemed immune to scrutiny. It wasn't unusual to see luxury cars come and go at all hours, yet no one questioned the comings and goings of staff and visitors. The house maintained a reputation of peaceful stability. People respected boundaries. or perhaps feared them. The facade was perfect, and that perfection was crucial to the tunnel's concealment. Staff accounts also reveal subtle inconsistencies that, when pieced together, paint a chilling picture. A gardener recalls hearing muffled conversations in a room that should have been empty. A housekeeper remembers feeling an inexplicable chill near the basement, even during sweltering summer months. A maintenance worker once noticed a panel in the floor that didn't align with the blueprints he had been given. These observations, scattered and seemingly trivial, formed the first threads of a web that would eventually lead investigators straight to the hidden tunnel. When the FBI first arrived, they were given a tour of the mansion, under the guise of standard procedure, of course. Agents walked the marble halls, examined the security systems, and noted the minor anomalies staff had mentioned. At first, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. The house radiated order, cleanliness, and the quiet authority of someone accustomed to control. But as any investigator knows, appearances can be deceiving, and in this case, they were a masterful deception. It was during a meticulous sweep of the basement that agents first noticed something odd. One wall, behind rows of carefully stacked wine racks, didn't quite align with the rest of the structure. The material was different, the seams less precise. It was subtle, almost invisible to an untrained eye, but it caught the attention of the agents. With a few measured taps, a hollow echo confirmed their suspicion. There was more here than met the eye. The discovery of the hidden wall was only the beginning. What followed was a painstaking process of uncovering what lay behind it. As the wall was carefully removed, it revealed a staircase descending into darkness. The air that escaped was damp and musty, carrying with it a faint metallic scent that would later haunt agents in their reports. They were standing at the threshold of something that had been meticulously hidden from the world, a secret so complete that even those who walked the halls daily had never noticed its presence. Imagine that moment, the realization that beneath the house, stretching out into the shadows, was a passage no one had authorized, no one had documented. It was a doorway into the unknown, and as agents prepared to descend, their training gave way to a natural human response, fear. Not fear of immediate danger, but fear of what they might find. What could exist in a space deliberately concealed for decades? And how could such a structure remain undiscovered in the heart of Hollywood, where curiosity is a constant companion? The tunnel itself, as later measurements would reveal, was extensive. It stretched for hundreds of feet beneath the property, branching into multiple chambers and alcoves. The construction was professional, deliberate, and resource-intensive. Reinforced walls, ventilation systems, and concealed exits suggested a level of planning that went far beyond a simple secret passage. Whoever built this tunnel had one objective: to remain hidden completely and permanently. Even the materials used in the tunnel's construction were remarkable. Reinforced concrete, steel supports, and subtle acoustic dampening suggested the work of professionals. Every corner was designed to be both functional and invisible. Every inch spoke to an intent not only to create a physical space, but to create a psychological barrier, ensuring that the activities within would remain hidden from the outside world. And what was inside that tunnel would soon become the focal point of an investigation that shook Hollywood to its core. Objects, signs of prior habitation, and eventually something far more disturbing awaited the agents as they carefully navigated the labyrinth. The very air seemed to press in on them, thick with the weight of secrets decades in the making. The discovery of the tunnel marked the point where the story transitioned from curiosity to horror, from speculation to undeniable reality. By the time the first steps were taken down into the tunnel, the FBI was already aware that this was no ordinary investigation. It would challenge their training, their assumptions, and their sense of what was possible. Each room they encountered, each hidden alcove, added to the mystery, raising more questions than answers. How had no one noticed? Who had the knowledge, the ability, and the audacity to construct such a passage? And most chillingly, why? But even as the agents documented the tunnel's layout and cataloged its contents, they couldn't prepare for the moment that would define the investigation: the discovery of lifeless bodies, carefully concealed, and evidence of activities that defied belief. This was not a case of burglary or fraud. This was something far darker and far more complex. The mansion, the tunnel, the hidden chambers. They were all part of a story that no one outside the FBI had imagined. The mansion nobody really knows had been hiding its most terrifying secret in plain sight. And as the agents descended further, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, the world outside remained oblivious. The story of fame, trust, and horror was about to unfold, layer by layer, chamber by chamber. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Hollywood is a city built on illusions. Glitz, glamour, and the carefully curated narratives of the rich and famous shape its identity. But beneath the red carpets and flashing cameras lies a web of rumors, whispers, and secrets, some trivial, some dark enough to chill the bones. In the case of Rob Reiner's mansion, the tunnel was not the first anomaly noticed by those attuned to the peculiarities of celebrity life. Long before the FBI arrived, strange stories circulated quietly among Hollywood insiders, rumors that were dismissed, laughed off, or buried in the noise of everyday gossip. The first whispers began years ago, carried by staff, neighbors, and occasional visitors. They spoke of odd deliveries at strange hours, trucks appearing in the dead of night, and packages that were never explained. One longtime gardener mentioned noticing unfamiliar markings near the property line, patterns that didn't align with typical landscaping or maintenance schedules. These were small details, easily overlooked in the grand scale of a mansion, but together they hinted at something unusual. Hollywood is fertile ground for exaggeration. Every eccentric behavior can become a story, every late-night visit a conspiracy theory. Yet, even in a city accustomed to the bizarre, the rumors about the mansion held a particular weight. Former staff described hearing noises that didn't correspond to normal household activity, footsteps echoing in empty corridors, doors opening and closing when no one was present, and vibrations in floors and walls that seemed impossible. Some attributed it to the natural settling of a large property or to maintenance systems. Others felt an instinctive unease, a gut sense that something hidden lurked just out of sight. The rumors intensified as Reiner's fame grew. Hollywood thrives on curiosity, and anyone with insider knowledge becomes a magnet for attention. One journalist, who had been investigating celebrity estates for decades, recalled a casual conversation with a former housekeeper who hesitated before mentioning a strange little door in the basement. The housekeeper laughed nervously, claiming it was probably nothing. But the journalist didn't dismiss it. That tiny seed of doubt would later guide her investigation into the mansion long before the FBI would take official notice. Even neighbors, those who observed the mansion from a distance, reported unusual activity. Late-night comings and goings, shadows moving behind curtains, and cars parked in ways that didn't align with typical household routines. One neighbor, a retired actor himself, described seeing a series of vans arrive in the middle of the night, with no signs of their departure until hours later. There were never any guests or events to justify such activity. To outsiders, it was a mystery. To those close to the house, it was a pattern that didn't add up. Staff members were particularly intriguing sources of rumor. In large estates, employees often have intimate knowledge of the property, but they also understand the unspoken rules of discretion. In the case of Reiner's mansion, some staff reported moments of unease, a cold draft in areas that should have been warm, shadows that seemed to move independently of anyone in the room, and areas of the house that were strictly off-limits without explanation. Questions were met with vague reassurances or subtle warnings. "Just focus on your work," was the standard response. This created a psychological barrier, a culture of silence where the extraordinary was quietly ignored. Rumors weren't limited to those inside the house. Industry contacts, friends, and casual acquaintances of Reiner mentioned peculiar behaviors, unexplained absences, insistence on privacy that went beyond normal celebrity standards, and a subtle, almost obsessive, interest in structural details of the mansion. These anecdotes, when considered individually, seemed innocuous. Taken together, they painted a picture of meticulous control, of a man deeply invested in what others could and could not see. And yet, the public was completely unaware. To the outside world, the mansion was the embodiment of Hollywood perfection. A celebrity home, beautifully maintained, unassuming in its ostentation. But the rumors, though largely contained within insider circles, were seeds of a narrative that would explode into one of the most shocking investigations in recent memory. They were clues, waiting for the right moment and the right people to connect them. The journalist who had first heard about this strange little door pursued it quietly over the years. She interviewed staff members, checked property records, and compared the mansion's known floor plans to what she could observe from public areas. There were inconsistencies, gaps, and unexplained anomalies in the documentation, perfect signs that someone was hiding something. Every rumor she collected added weight to the possibility that beneath the mansion lay a hidden structure, a secret that had gone unnoticed for decades. Then came the tipping point. A former construction worker, who had been employed briefly on the property, hinted at knowledge of a tunnel during an offhand conversation. At first, the journalist dismissed it as exaggeration, the ramblings of someone seeking attention. But when she cross-referenced the worker's claims with previous rumors, patterns emerged. The tunnel wasn't just speculation, it had to exist. It was too specific, too consistent, too persistent to ignore. Social media began to play its part, even before the FBI's involvement. Accounts dedicated to Hollywood gossip noticed the discrepancies and began connecting dots that were invisible to casual observers. Shadowy theories circulated: secret rooms, undisclosed renovations, hidden basements. These theories ranged from the plausible to the absurd, but their proliferation created pressure for formal investigation. The story was gaining traction, moving from whispers to public consciousness. Despite all this, no one could have predicted the scale of what would be discovered. Rumors and observations, even when meticulously collected, pale in comparison to the stark reality of a fully constructed tunnel beneath a mansion. The level of planning, the sophistication of construction, and the evidence of deliberate concealment went far beyond anything Hollywood insiders had imagined. The tunnel wasn't just hidden, it was designed to be undetectable, and its purpose remained unclear. In Hollywood, secrecy is currency. Everyone guards something, whether it's a personal failing, a career scandal, or an illicit affair. But the tunnel under Reiner's mansion represented a level of secrecy that dwarfed ordinary concerns. It was a physical manifestation of concealment, a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that even those we think we know best can harbor unimaginable secrets. The rumors, though dismissed for years, played a critical role in the eventual FBI investigation. They provided a trail, however faint, that investigators could follow. Each whispered conversation, each subtle observation, each peculiar delivery contributed to a growing mosaic of suspicion. And when the right combination of reports, tips, and inconsistencies aligned, the authorities knew it was time to act. What the rumors had hinted at, peculiarities, anomalies, unexplained behaviors, would pale in comparison to the truth. For now, they remained tantalizing breadcrumbs, teasing a larger revelation that would soon come to light. The quiet murmurings of staff and neighbors were the first signs of a secret that would shake Hollywood and the nation alike. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It was a morning like any other in the Hollywood Hills, the sun spilling gold over manicured lawns and winding streets. Birds chirped lazily, and the city stirred to life with its usual hum of traffic and distant sirens. But for the residents near Rob Reiner's mansion, the day would not be ordinary. Black SUVs with tinted windows rolled silently up the long driveway, agents in dark suits moving with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The unexpected arrival of the FBI would mark the beginning of an investigation that no one in Hollywood, or the world, was prepared for. The agents had come prepared for anything. Or so they thought. Their mandate was clear: investigate reports of a secret tunnel beneath the mansion. The tip had come from a combination of insiders, former staff members, construction workers, and journalists who had painstakingly pieced together discrepancies in the mansion's design. Yet nothing could have prepared them for the scene that awaited beyond the front doors. At first, the house appeared peaceful, even serene. The same polished exterior, the same welcoming facade, the same sense of normalcy that had allowed decades of secrecy to flourish. But as the agents moved inside, the first hints of anomaly became apparent. Doors that were supposed to be locked were surprisingly accessible. Hallways led to spaces that didn't appear on official blueprints. Even the lighting seemed calibrated in unusual ways, casting shadows that hinted at hidden recesses. From the beginning, the FBI team was meticulous. Every corner was photographed, every detail logged. Agents swept the grounds with infrared cameras and advanced scanning equipment, searching for anything that could confirm the rumors they had been sent to investigate. And then they found it. A subtle anomaly in the basement floor, a panel that seemed slightly out of place. At first glance, it appeared to be just another utility access point, perhaps for maintenance or electrical wiring. But closer inspection revealed it was something far more deliberate. The tension in the room was palpable. Agents exchanged brief, sharp glances, each aware that the stakes were higher than normal. This was Hollywood, after all, a world where appearances are everything, and where secrets are as carefully guarded as treasure. But this was no ordinary investigation. They were about to enter a space that had been hidden for decades, designed with precision to avoid detection. Every step they took was a step into the unknown, and the unknown has a way of testing even the most seasoned professionals. When the panel was removed, the true scale of the secret became apparent. A narrow staircase descended into darkness, damp and cool, with a faint metallic scent that suggested something far from ordinary. Agents paused at the top, assessing the risk and considering the implications. This was more than a hidden room. It was the entrance to a tunnel, carefully constructed and concealed with the skill of someone who understood both engineering and secrecy. Descending into the tunnel was not merely physical, it was psychological. The air grew colder, thicker, heavy with the weight of history and hidden truths. Every creak of the steps, every faint echo of movement, heightened the tension. Agents were trained to expect danger, but even their experience could not prepare them for what lay ahead. This tunnel was a carefully orchestrated world beneath a mansion that everyone assumed they understood. As they moved deeper, the layout of the tunnel began to reveal itself. Branching corridors, hidden alcoves, and reinforced walls suggested extensive planning. Whoever had built this wanted to ensure that nothing, and no one, could stumble upon their secrets. Evidence of human activity, subtle but undeniable, began to appear. Footprints in dust, faint marks on walls, and items that seemed deliberately left behind, either as markers or warnings. The implications were immediate and unsettling. This was not a random or accidental construction. It was deliberate, methodical, and maintained over time. The scale of effort required to create a tunnel of this magnitude without detection was staggering. It suggested resources, knowledge, and most chillingly, intent. Someone had invested immense energy to ensure that whatever occurred here remained hidden, shielded from public scrutiny and law enforcement alike. Agents were aware that psychological preparation would be key. The initial discovery of a secret passage is one thing. What might be hidden at the end is entirely another. Every step forward demanded courage, discipline, and an ability to compartmentalize fear. The FBI team had to balance curiosity with caution, documenting every inch while remaining vigilant for any potential threat. The air of suspense was almost tangible. Then came the first discovery that made agents freeze. A small, unassuming object lay partially hidden in a shadowed corner of one of the tunnel's side chambers. At first glance, it seemed innocuous, a piece of paper, a container, but closer inspection revealed markings and residues that hinted at something far more sinister. It was the first tangible proof that the tunnel had not been built simply for storage or maintenance. It had a purpose, one that would soon reveal itself in the most disturbing way imaginable. The agents proceeded carefully, each step measured, each corner approached with the knowledge that the ordinary rules of investigation might not apply. They were entering a space intentionally designed to deceive, manipulate, and conceal. Every sound, every shadow, was amplified by the tunnel's design, feeding uncertainty and heightening awareness. Even as they advanced, communication with the surface remained crucial. Agents relayed observations back to command, noting the tunnel's structure, air quality, and apparent purpose. Every piece of data collected would later play a role in understanding the tunnel's construction and the activities it had concealed. The methodical approach reflected years of training. Yet even with this expertise, the magnitude of what lay beneath the mansion was staggering. It was not long before they reached the first chamber of true interest. The air grew heavier, the smell stronger, and the lighting, though artificial, cast shadows that seemed to move independently. It was here that the first signs of human activity became undeniable. Objects carefully hidden, materials suggesting habitation or usage, and subtle disturbances in the dust hinted at repeated, deliberate presence. At that moment, the agents realized they were dealing with something far beyond mere curiosity or rumor. This was an environment that had been carefully maintained, monitored, and hidden, perhaps for years. It suggested both sophistication and audacity. And as they moved further, the first faint indications of human tragedy began to appear, foreshadowing the discovery that would shake the entire investigation. Hollywood had long been a city of secrets, but the FBI's entry into Rob Reiner's mansion marked the first time one of its most chilling mysteries had begun to emerge into the light. The combination of wealth, fame, and deliberate concealment had created a perfect environment for a secret to remain hidden, but only for so long. And as the agents prepared to delve deeper, the first shocking truths began to surface. Every step forward brought them closer to the unimaginable, a confrontation with reality that would turn speculation into horror. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment the first flashlight pierced the darkness of the hidden staircase, the reality of the tunnel hit with full force. The air was damp, carrying a faint metallic tang that clung to the agent's senses. The walls, reinforced with concrete and steel, were cold and unyielding, stretching into shadows that seemed to absorb light itself. Every step down echoed ominously, amplifying the tension in the narrow space. For the FBI, this was more than an investigation. It was a confrontation with the unknown, a descent into a space deliberately designed to conceal its secrets from the world above. At the top of the tunnel, the entrance seemed deceptively ordinary, almost mundane. But as they proceeded, the scale and sophistication of the construction became undeniable. The passageway twisted and turned, branching into multiple corridors that led to rooms carefully carved into the subterranean structure. It was clear that this was no casual hideaway. Whoever had designed it had a singular objective: complete secrecy. Every wall, every support beam, every ventilation duct had been engineered to remain hidden, undetectable, and insulated from the mansion above. The tunnel's layout suggested planning on a level that few would imagine. Some chambers were large enough to accommodate multiple people, while others were narrow, intentionally claustrophobic, and difficult to navigate. Agents noted subtle variations in construction materials, changes in wall thickness, and the occasional use of sound-dampening techniques. These details hinted at a deep understanding of both engineering and human behavior. The tunnel was not just a passage. It was a controlled environment, designed to manage movement, conceal activity, and protect those within from discovery. As they moved deeper, agents discovered evidence of prior habitation. Footprints in the dust suggested frequent travel, objects left behind hinted at extended stays, and signs of deliberate organization indicated the presence of a meticulous occupant or multiple occupants. Every piece of evidence raised questions. Who had the knowledge and resources to build this? How long had it been in use? And most importantly, what was its purpose? The psychological impact on the agents was immediate. Training can prepare someone for danger, but it cannot prepare them for the unnerving sensation of entering a space meant to hide human activity for years. Every corner seemed to whisper secrets. Every shadow suggested unseen presence. The tension was palpable, heightened by the knowledge that the tunnel could hold evidence far more disturbing than mere clandestine movement. Small anomalies began to appear. A faint trail of moisture along the floor suggested recent activity. Marks on the walls, too precise to be accidental, hinted at tools or objects repeatedly used in specific locations. Items left behind were subtle, yet deliberate. A piece of cloth, a small container, remnants of materials that hinted at functions hidden from view. The combination of these elements suggested that this was not an abandoned space, but one maintained with care, activity, and intent. The tunnel's branching corridors presented additional challenges. Some passages ended abruptly, Others led to alcoves that seemed to serve no immediate purpose. Agents speculated on the possibility of hidden compartments, escape routes, or areas designed to mislead intruders. Each discovery compounded the mystery, raising the stakes and intensifying the need for methodical documentation. Every step carried both risk and revelation. Communication with command above ground was constant. Agents relayed dimensions, structural anomalies, and signs of human presence. Their notes would later form the backbone of a detailed reconstruction of the tunnel's purpose and layout. But for the moment, the immediate concern was simple: proceed carefully, document meticulously, and prepare for whatever lay ahead. Then, in a side chamber barely noticeable from the main corridor, they encountered the first evidence of something truly unusual. At first, it appeared to be a simple container, partially concealed by shadows. But upon closer inspection, agents realized it contained traces of biological material, objects that suggested the tunnel had been used for purposes far beyond ordinary secrecy. The realization sent a chill through the team. This was no longer simply a hidden passage. It was a scene of deliberate concealment, evidence of activities that demanded further investigation. The psychological weight of the tunnel was magnified by its design. Narrow corridors forced the agents into single file, amplifying the sense of confinement. Sound traveled in strange ways, echoing unnaturally and creating the impression of movement where there was none. The walls themselves seemed to absorb light, making the flashlight beams look feeble against the darkness. The combination of sensory deprivation, spatial confinement, and mounting evidence created an atmosphere that tested even seasoned professionals. As they advanced, the agents began cataloging structural features. Reinforced beams suggested areas designed to support heavy weight or concealed chambers above or below. Small vents, carefully positioned, indicated a concern for airflow and possibly long-term occupancy. Marks on the walls hinted at mechanical work, perhaps even modifications over time. Each observation reinforced the notion that the tunnel was a deliberate construction, built with precision, forethought, and a clear objective. Despite the professionalism of the team, unease grew. The tunnel was a carefully orchestrated environment, but it also carried an undeniable sense of foreboding. Every step, every shadow, and every discovery reinforced the idea that the space was not simply functional. It was designed to manipulate perception, to conceal truth, and to maintain secrecy at all costs. Agents were acutely aware that they were not just exploring a structure. They were entering the inner workings of someone's deliberate concealment. Then came the first signs of truly human activity. Small items, almost imperceptible at first, began to appear in patterns that suggested organized placement. Personal effects, remnants of clothing, and other objects hinted at repeated use. Agents began to understand that the tunnel was not just a passageway, but a site of ongoing activity, maintained over time and possibly used for purposes that were unimaginable at first glance. Every discovery compounded the mystery. The tunnel was far more extensive than initial reports had suggested. Branching corridors led to hidden chambers, some fully constructed, others partially built or modified over time. The level of effort required to create such a network of spaces without detection was staggering. Whoever had built and maintained the tunnel had both the knowledge and the resources to execute a plan of extraordinary complexity. The agents pressed onward, documenting each detail, mapping each corridor, and cataloging every object. They understood that the tunnel was more than a physical space. It was a psychological labyrinth, designed to protect secrets, manipulate perception, and maintain concealment. The weight of that realization added to the tension, each step forward a mix of discovery and dread. And then, in the deepest chamber explored that day, they encountered the first concrete evidence that would define the investigation. Something carefully hidden, something that confirmed every fear and suspicion. The first indication that the tunnel had been used for purposes beyond mere passage. The air grew heavier, the shadows darker, and the reality of what they were confronting became impossible to ignore. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. As the FBI agents pressed deeper into the tunnel, the atmosphere changed. The initial tension, The cautious curiosity that marked the first steps into the hidden passage evolved into a gripping sense of dread. The air was thicker now, carrying a musty, metallic tang that suggested prolonged human presence, or worse, the residue of activities that should never have occurred. Every step echoed ominously, bouncing off walls designed to absorb sound just enough to create an eerie sense of isolation. It was as though the tunnel itself was alive, reacting to the intrusion of outsiders into its carefully maintained secrecy. The first signs of activity were subtle, almost imperceptible. A smear of dirt in an otherwise pristine corner, the faint indentation of a footprint in the dust, and objects slightly out of place, all pointed to deliberate human movement. Agents trained to detect anomalies were immediately alert. Here, in the subterranean silence beneath one of Hollywood's most prominent homes, the ordinary assumptions of crime scenes did not apply. This was a world crafted to hide, deceive, and misdirect, and the careful placement of each object, each subtle mark, spoke volumes. Among the first discoveries was a series of discarded items, containers with unknown residues, scraps of material carefully folded, and small pieces of equipment that hinted at ongoing use. While their exact purpose was unclear, the organized nature of these items suggested planning and repetition. Someone, or multiple people, had navigated these corridors regularly, leaving traces both intentional and inadvertent. Each finding compounded the growing unease, adding layers to the narrative the tunnel seemed to be telling. The tunnel's design itself provided clues. Narrow hallways occasionally opened into small alcoves or chambers, some seemingly innocuous, others fortified with reinforced walls. The variations in construction hinted at different uses: storage, concealment, and perhaps even observation. Ventilation shafts, cleverly hidden, allowed airflow to distant areas, and subtle differences in wall materials suggested the builders were experimenting with soundproofing, temperature control, and possibly chemical containment. It became clear that this was not a haphazard project. Every aspect of the tunnel had been deliberately engineered, likely with significant expertise and careful attention to detail. Agents noticed remnants of what could only be described as habitation. Dust patterns indicated recent movement, and small personal items, clothing fragments, makeshift bedding materials, and worn containers hinted at extended stays. Even without fully understanding the purpose, the evidence pointed toward a level of human activity far beyond a simple passageway. This was a space lived in, monitored, and maintained. Someone had ensured that its existence remained invisible while allowing the tunnel to function effectively for its intended and unknown purpose. Psychologically, the implications were profound. The agents were trained to expect the unexpected, yet the realization that they were intruding into a meticulously maintained, secret subterranean world created unease. The tunnel was not simply a construction project. It was a controlled environment designed to manipulate those who entered. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, sound traveled unpredictably, and even the air felt oppressive, as though carrying the weight of hidden histories and unspoken acts. Small anomalies began to coalesce into patterns. Marks on the walls suggested repeated contact with objects or tools, and impressions in the dust indicated a regular flow of movement. Items were not randomly scattered, but arranged in ways that implied a purpose. Perhaps ritualistic, perhaps practical, but definitely intentional. Each clue raised more questions than answers. Who had been here? How often? And what exactly were they doing? In one chamber, agents discovered a small cache of objects that were immediately unsettling. Containers held unidentified substances, some showing signs of chemical treatment. Fragments of materials that appeared to be fabric, possibly clothing, were carefully folded, yet clearly used. Odd mechanical parts suggested manipulation of equipment, potentially to maintain ventilation or concealment. Each object was cataloged meticulously, every detail photographed and preserved, but none provided immediate clarity. The evidence was intentionally ambiguous, hinting at activity without revealing the full narrative. The tension heightened further when agents noticed disturbances in the tunnel structure. A wall panel, previously unnoticed, had been altered in a way that suggested recent modification. Dust had been disturbed, and faint fingerprints indicated human interaction not long before the discovery. This revealed a chilling reality. The tunnel was not abandoned. Its occupants, or someone familiar with it, had maintained control, perhaps even in recent days. This level of ongoing activity magnified the urgency and gravity of the investigation. Agents were acutely aware of the psychological toll. The tunnel was a claustrophobic maze, narrow and twisting, creating disorientation. Every corner brought uncertainty. Every shadow suggested movement. The objects left behind, the patterns in the dust, and the subtle disturbances conveyed a presence, an unseen actor watching, maintaining, and manipulating the hidden space. Then came the first clear indication of human tragedy. In a small, concealed chamber, agents encountered items that could only suggest deliberate concealment of living, or formerly living, beings. Clothing remnants, personal effects, and traces of biological material hinted at something far darker than mere secret storage or clandestine passage. The evidence was subtle but unmistakable. The tunnel was more than a hidden structure. It had been used in ways that demanded investigation, documentation, and careful interpretation. As agents cataloged these findings, the narrative of the tunnel began to emerge. This was not just a secret passage beneath a mansion. It was a carefully controlled environment for activity that required concealment, planning, and discretion. Its builders had gone to extraordinary lengths to maintain secrecy, using engineering, psychology, and logistics to ensure that the world above remained oblivious. Even as they documented the signs of disturbing activity, agents could not fully prepare for what lay further along the corridor. The evidence grew increasingly compelling, and the tunnel seemed to stretch further into unknown territory, each turn revealing new hints of the activities concealed within. It became clear that they were only at the threshold of understanding the full scope of what had taken place beneath the mansion. With every step, the weight of anticipation increased. What began as subtle anomalies and small traces of movement had escalated into undeniable evidence of human activity with deeply unsettling implications. Agents were confronted with the reality that this tunnel was not just hidden. It had been actively maintained for purposes that were likely criminal, secretive, and potentially horrifying. And as they prepared to move deeper into the labyrinth, the first real glimpse of the unimaginable awaited. A discovery that would confirm the worst fears, turning speculation into undeniable, chilling truth. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The air grew heavier as the agents advanced deeper into the tunnel. The initial tension that had gripped them in the upper chambers now evolved into a palpable dread, a gnawing realization that the evidence of human activity was far more sinister than anything they had imagined. Small traces of clothing, subtle dust impressions, and remnants of habitation were no longer merely suggestive. They pointed to something horrifying. And then, they found the first bodies. The discovery was sudden, almost surreal. One of the agents noticed a faint outline in the shadows of a side chamber. At first, it appeared to be a pile of discarded items, old blankets, clothing, or supplies. But as the light fell upon it, the truth became undeniable. The shapes were human, lifeless, carefully arranged, yet unmistakably dead. The first body was small, partially concealed behind a false partition, as if someone had attempted to hide it from view. The pallor of the skin, the stiffness of the limbs, and the unnatural stillness sent a chill through the team. Immediate procedure kicked in. Agents documented the scene meticulously, photographing every detail, noting the position of the body, and cataloging surrounding objects. But even as they followed protocol, an undeniable psychological weight pressed down. This was not a routine investigation. This was a confrontation with deliberate concealment, with the raw, incomprehensible reality of death hidden beneath a life of celebrity and influence. The first body led to the second. As agents moved cautiously down the adjacent corridor, they found another chamber, slightly larger, containing two more individuals. Unlike the first, these were arranged with an unsettling precision. Evidence suggested intentional placement. Limbs folded, faces partially obscured, personal effects left nearby. Whoever had placed them had been methodical, meticulous, and calculated. It was clear that the tunnel was not merely a passageway, but a repository for something far darker than anyone had imagined. Agents began to notice patterns. Each chamber held bodies in similar arrangements, accompanied by objects that hinted at the organization and intent of the person or persons responsible. Clothing fragments, small containers, and mechanical remnants were present in each room, suggesting both repetition and ritual. The tunnel was not abandoned. It had been actively maintained for purposes that were methodical and deliberate. Psychologically, the impact was devastating. Law enforcement officers are trained to confront crime, death, and human suffering, but nothing in their training could have prepared them for the dissonance of this discovery. The juxtaposition was staggering: a lavish mansion above, exuding normalcy and success, and beneath it, a hidden world of horror, meticulously concealed for years. The cognitive dissonance weighed heavily, as if the tunnel itself was a physical manifestation of betrayal and deception. Forensic teams began preliminary assessments on site. Signs suggested that the bodies had been there for varying lengths of time, some relatively recent, others possibly months or even years. This indicated a sustained pattern of concealment, a chilling reality that someone had been using the tunnel over an extended period, maintaining it for their own purposes while remaining undetected by the world above. The placement of the bodies also revealed disturbing intentionality. Certain chambers seemed designed specifically to house them: reinforced walls and strategic lighting, or absence of lighting, ensuring that each individual remained out of sight. The tunnel's architecture, previously appreciated for its engineering, now took on a darker meaning. Every element served concealment and secrecy. The space was a tool, a mechanism for hiding human life, and ultimately, human death. Agents noted that the arrangement of the bodies suggested knowledge of law enforcement procedure. Each chamber was positioned in such a way that detection from above ground was unlikely. False partitions, hidden doors, and sound-dampening materials created both physical and psychological barriers. Whoever had constructed the tunnel understood the potential consequences and had engineered solutions to mitigate discovery. The level of sophistication was unnerving. As they continued documenting, the team uncovered personal effects alongside the bodies: watches, small pieces of jewelry, torn fragments of clothing. Each item told a story, yet the story was incomplete, fragmented. It was a narrative deliberately obscured, forcing investigators to piece together the human tragedy hidden beneath layers of secrecy and deception. Every artifact suggested life. Every placement suggested intent. The psychological toll on the agents intensified as they moved from chamber to chamber. They were trained to compartmentalize, to focus on procedure, but the sheer number of bodies and the meticulous care in their concealment made emotional detachment nearly impossible. The tunnel had become a repository not just for human remains, but for dread itself, a concentrated, physical manifestation of something profoundly wrong. The first bodies also raised immediate and pressing questions. How had no one noticed this before? Who else might be involved? Were there survivors, witnesses, or additional chambers yet to be discovered? And most chillingly, what was the motive behind this deliberate concealment? Each unanswered question amplified the suspense, leaving agents, and soon, the public, to grapple with the unimaginable. It became clear that the discovery of these bodies would define the investigation. The tunnel was no longer simply an architectural curiosity or a site of rumors. It was a crime scene of staggering complexity. Every subsequent chamber promised further revelations, each one likely more shocking than the last. The agents were now confronted with a narrative that stretched beyond ordinary comprehension, a story that intertwined fame, secrecy, and horror in ways few could anticipate. And as they prepared to venture deeper, the tunnel seemed to hold its breath. Each step forward was a step further into darkness, both literal and metaphorical. The scale of the secret, the meticulous planning, and the human tragedy embedded within the walls demanded answers. But the answers were guarded jealously by the darkness itself. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The discovery of the first bodies had already sent shockwaves through the team. But what came next pushed them into a realm that no one could have prepared for. A moment that would haunt every agent involved, a scene so profoundly disturbing that it forced even the most seasoned investigators to pause. The tunnel beneath Rob Reiner's mansion was no ordinary crime scene. It was a meticulously orchestrated labyrinth, a hidden world of death and secrecy, and now its true magnitude was beginning to reveal itself. As agents moved deeper, the corridors twisted and turned, opening into chambers larger and more elaborately concealed than any previously encountered. Reinforced walls, hidden alcoves, and subtle ventilation systems created an environment both functional and unnervingly deliberate. In one chamber, the first signs of mechanical manipulation were evident. An intricate set of pulleys, levers, and wiring suggested the tunnel had been actively managed, possibly to move items or even people without detection. The complexity of the setup was enough to make trained agents turn pale. The second wave of bodies revealed an even more chilling reality. Unlike the first, these were positioned in ways that suggested staging, almost theatrical in their presentation. Limbs carefully folded, faces partially obscured, personal items arranged deliberately. It was as if the creator of the tunnel wanted a narrative to be preserved, or perhaps wanted it to be discovered in a very particular way. The juxtaposition of meticulous care and horrific content created a surreal, almost cinematic horror. Agents had seen organized crime, serial offenses, and mass concealment, but this was different. This was artful and horrifying. Evidence indicated that the tunnel had been maintained over time. Dust patterns suggested recent movement, faint smudges on walls indicated deliberate human contact, and the arrangement of objects in each chamber reflected careful planning. Whoever had done this had a precise understanding of concealment, of psychology, and of risk management. The sophistication suggested not a fleeting whim, but an ongoing operation, meticulously curated to remain hidden from discovery. Agents began to piece together the tunnel's operational logic. Chambers seemed to be organized for multiple purposes: temporary concealment, long-term storage, and perhaps even observation. Ventilation systems were placed strategically, lighting was carefully controlled, and access points were hidden behind false walls and reinforced panels. Every element suggested a mind obsessed with secrecy, control, and deliberate concealment. The psychological impact was profound. Law enforcement officers are trained to compartmentalize, to approach even the most disturbing scenes with procedural detachment. Yet the combination of scale, complexity, and human tragedy in this tunnel was unlike anything they had encountered. Agents described a feeling of disbelief, an almost paralyzing sense that reality had been warped. They were standing in a meticulously constructed underworld of horror, beneath a mansion that outwardly represented charm, success, and normalcy. Each new chamber presented more evidence, more layers to an incomprehensible story. Personal items, fragments of clothing, and objects of unknown function were arranged with deliberate intent. Patterns began to emerge, hinting at behaviors, routines, and perhaps even rituals. The tunnel had not been abandoned. It had been actively maintained, monitored, and manipulated to serve a purpose that remained hidden. The turning point came when agents discovered a chamber larger than any previously seen. The scale was staggering, enough space to hold multiple people comfortably, with reinforced walls, ventilation, and concealed exits. Evidence suggested that this chamber had been used for extended periods, with traces of habitation meticulously managed to avoid detection. The level of planning, foresight, and technical skill required to construct such a space beneath a mansion in Hollywood was staggering. It was here that the FBI turned pale. Hidden within this expansive chamber were signs of systematic concealment. Organized, repeated, deliberate. Objects left behind were functional yet disturbing, hinting at purposes both sinister and calculated. The scale of human manipulation, combined with the architectural sophistication of the tunnel, revealed a reality that was both frightening and almost impossible to comprehend. Even as agents continued their careful documentation, the implications became clear. This was not merely a case of hidden activity or secret passageways. This was a deliberate, ongoing operation designed to conceal something profoundly disturbing. The tunnel was a controlled environment, carefully engineered to protect its secrets and to preserve evidence of activity that few could imagine. The pallor on the faces of the agents was not just a response to the horror of what they were seeing. It was an acknowledgement of the magnitude of the secret itself and of the human capacity for planning, concealment, and deliberate manipulation. The tunnel beneath the mansion was more than a physical space. It was a psychological landscape, a testament to obsession, secrecy, and the extremes to which someone would go to hide the unimaginable. With each passing chamber, the story became more complex, more terrifying, and more layered. Agents realized that the investigation had only just begun, and that the depth of the tunnel, both literally and figuratively, would continue to challenge every assumption they had about the property, its occupants, and the horrors concealed within. And as they prepared to venture further, into spaces even more hidden and controlled, the weight of anticipation was overwhelming. Each step forward promised revelation, yet also demanded courage, precision, and psychological resilience. The FBI had entered a world few could imagine, and each discovery was a step deeper into darkness. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. As the agents ventured further, the tunnel began to reveal its most terrifying truths. The initial discoveries, small traces of human activity and a few bodies, were only the tip of a meticulously concealed iceberg. The deeper corridors expanded into larger chambers, each more deliberately constructed and more chilling than the last. The design suggested careful forethought, not merely to conceal, but to control, manage, and maintain secrecy over decades. The first of these chambers was almost surgical in its precision. Reinforced walls, hidden vents, and subtle soundproofing gave the space an unnervingly clinical feel. Agents immediately noticed the careful organization of objects. Containers labeled in a cryptic way, personal items arranged meticulously, and evidence of repeated use. Every detail hinted at extended occupation, suggesting the tunnel was more than a temporary hideout. It was a controlled, ongoing environment designed to serve a specific, hidden purpose. What shocked the FBI most was the clear evidence of systematic concealment. Multiple chambers contained signs that human life had been deliberately managed within this underground labyrinth. Clothing fragments, small bedding arrangements, and faint traces of human waste indicated that the tunnel had functioned as both passageway and habitation. The tunnel's design reflected foresight, precision, and a psychological understanding of how to maintain control over both space and human activity.